The reduction in the carrying capacity of water by the rivers will lead to overflow of the water and therefore it causes flood. The fresh water is divided into two types. One is the surface water and the other one is the groundwater. The level of groundwater also depends on the surface water. The amount of surface water can also depend on the groundwater. Both are interconnected to one another. Plants are one of the important things or important features that are needed in order to prevent flood. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to today's session on Environmental Studies for second semester BCom. I'm Dr. Divya, Environmental Studies faculty, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. So we shall continue with study today's session with Unit 3, that is Natural Resources, Renewable and Non-Renewable Resources. So in today's session, let us learn about water, what are the uses of water, and also let's learn about the drought and the floods and what impact it has on the environment. So to begin with, let us learn what water is. So water is the most abundant and it is the inexhaustible renewable resource. So water comes under the renewable resources like plants. So renewable means it will never get exhausted. It will never become empty. So therefore it is a renewable resource. And the 70% of the globe or the earth is covered by water in the form of oceans, rivers, lakes, etc. So we have both fresh water and marine water that is covering our planet. In that 70% is made up of oceans, rivers, lakes, etc. Small streams, ponds, where various sources of water. Of this 70%, only 3% is available as fresh water. So this fresh water can be used for various industrial purposes and all that. So imagine 70% of a globe or the earth is covered by water, and out of that 70%, only 3% is fresh water. Again in that 3%, from this 3%, roughly 2% is in the frozen form, that is in the polar regions or the polar ice caps, and only 1% that is there is used as drinking water or potable water. So potable water means the water that can be used for the domestic and the drinking purposes. So imagine now how much need is it for us to save water? Of course, water is a renewable resource. So when we hear the word renewable resource, we might think there is no need for us to save water because it is a renewable resource. It will never get exhausted. But the thing is here, out of the 70%, only 3% that is there is fresh water. And again in that 3%, fresh water, 2% cannot be utilized because it is in the form of glaciers, ice, etc. Therefore, only 1% that is there is available for human consumption, that is for drinking purpose, cooking purpose and all that. So, imagine the whole population of this planet has to depend on this 1% of water. Now we know why it is very important for us to save water, right? Because only 1% is available for drinking or utility purposes, and therefore it is the potable water. So 90%. So out of this 1% that is there, 90% of the water itself will be utilized for agriculture purpose. So again in that 1%, 90% is used for agricultural purposes to grow crops and all that, because plants need water for their survival, and therefore these plants are in turn food for human beings as well as for other animals. So therefore 90% of water is utilized for agriculture purpose, and whatever remaining water that is available, that has to be some percentage that is there, that has to be utilized by the people. So therefore we need to use water very, very cautiously. Do not unnecessarily waste water. So fresh water, as I told you, it is a renewable resource, but still the world's supply of clean fresh water is steadily decreasing. Why? Because of we people, right? Whatever fresh water is there, that also we are polluting with agricultural waste, with industrial waste, by washing clothes on the river banks, therefore dirtying that or polluting that particular water, and what not ill effects we cause on that particular fresh water, right? So that is why, though fresh water is a renewable resource, the fresh water is becoming depleted. Why? Because we have learnt about something called as ecological succession in the previous sessions, right? Wherein how the erosion of the soil will occur, then the eutrophication process will take place. Therefore, what will happen? The lake eventually, after many years, that particular freshwater body that is there, either the pond or the lake or whatever is that is there, that will get converted into terrestrial land. Now, because of our greed and our activities itself, we are depleting the freshwater resources. So therefore, though freshwater is a renewable resource, it is each and every person's duty, whoever is using the water, to minimize the wastage of water. So this is about water. So next, let's learn what are the sources of fresh water. So I told you 1% water that is there is available as fresh water. So from where exactly do we get this fresh water? So therefore, the fresh water is divided into two types. One is the surface water and the other one is the groundwater. So surface water means the water that is present on the surface of the soil. Say for example, we have the river, the lake, so the freshwater wetland, all these are surface waters, right? It is seen to us, it is present on the surface of the land. So surface water is renewable or it gets replenished because of precipitation. So precipitation is nothing but rainfall. Again here, if the surface water has to get replenished, we have to plant good number of trees. Deforestation should be avoided. So that is why each and every organism living in this planet, they are interconnected to one another. You disturb one, the other gets disturbed. So therefore, because rainfall is the main reason for maintaining a balance or renewing the fresh water, it is very, very important to maintain the forest as well. So this is about surface water. Next, talking about groundwater, it is the subsurface water, that is water that is present below the land or below the soil or below the ground. It is called as the groundwater. So subsurface water or groundwater is also a fresh water that is located in the pore spaces of the soil and the rocks. We cannot see it, but still you take a soil in a cotton cloth and you just squeeze it, you can see water dripping out of it. But can you see it with your eyes? No. Why? Because it is scattered somewhere below the ground. That is, it is mixed with the soil and it is not seen like how you can see pure water in the lakes and rivers. No, like that it is not visible. So that is nothing but groundwater. And it is also the water that is flowing within the aquifers below the water table. So below, that is underground, below the water table also, there is water that is flowing. The best example is springs, right? Best example is a well water. It is a groundwater because we dig the well, there the water will start bubbling out. That is from the below surface of the earth, from the aquifers, the water will start bubbling out. So that is the place where we build a well so that the water gets collected in the well. So that is nothing but groundwater and it is also called as the subsurface water. So next, let's study about the uses of surface and groundwater. So both of these are the fresh water. Why we are talking about only the fresh water is because the fresh water is the one that is used for both the commercial and domestic purposes throughout every day. So that is why. So here the uses have been divided into consumptive uses and non-consumptive uses. So consumptive uses, here the water is completely utilized and it cannot be reused. That is, it cannot be recycled and it cannot be used again. Such type of use of water is called as consumptive use. Say for example, domestic water, industrial water, irrigation related water, all that once you use, it is over. You cannot get it back. You cannot recycle and you cannot get it back. So they are the consumptive uses of water. The non-consumptive uses of water is, here even though the water is completely, here in such cases, the water is not completely utilized and therefore it can be reused. Say for example, sewage water. So what is sewage? All the industrial waste and all that would have been dumped into a particular water body. Now that water body, what can be done is it can be collected. Water can be collected. Sewage treatment can be given to that. The water can be purified and it can be used for domestic purposes and all that. Here, the utilized water that is there, that can be again reused by the process of recycling. So that is the non-consumptive use of water. So water that can be treated and returned as surface water, for example, the sewage. Here we have taken the example, that is hydropower plant. So whatever water it is used in the hydropower plant, it will contain a lot of unwanted minerals or unwanted substances which are not good for the domestic use. So therefore such water can be treated and it can be reused again. So that is the two uses of water, wherein it has been divided into consumptive use of fresh water and non-consumptive use of fresh water. So what is consumptive use? Here, once the water is completely utilized, you cannot reuse it back. It cannot be renewed back. So that is consumptive use. Example, water that is used for domestic purposes, for industrial purposes and for irrigation purposes. Next is non-consumptive use, means here water will be completely utilized for the purpose. For example, in a hydroelectric plant, but that used water you can again replenish it, recycle it through sewage treatment, and again you can utilize it again for domestic purposes, for various other purposes. So that is non-consumptive use of water. Next, moving on to the uses of water in detail. So uses of water we studied under two headings: consumptive use of water and non-consumptive use of water. So you know the difference now between the two. So next, talking about uses of water. So 8% of worldwide fresh water is used for domestic purposes like drinking, bathing, cooking, washing, sanitation and for gardening purposes. So 8%. So I told you only 1% of water is available as fresh water. Among that 1%, maximum amount is used for agriculture. The remaining that is there is used for domestic purposes such as for drinking purpose, for bathing purpose, for cooking, washing, for cleaning purpose, that is sanitation, then for gardening purpose and all that. So water also is used in commercial establishments, like in hotels, large amount of water will be used. In theatres especially to run the air coolers, waters are used. And in educational institutions also waters are used, offices, etc. So for commercial purpose also, on a large scale, the fresh water is being used. And apart from that, almost 60 to 70% of fresh water is used for agriculture, that is for irrigation or providing water for agriculture. And apart from that, water is also used for freshwater commercial fisheries, that is to make pisciculture, aquaculture and all that. That is, pisciculture, aquaculture is nothing but wherein fishes are reared in the artificial condition, wherein tanks will be built and the tanks will be filled with water, and there the fishes will be reared for the commercial purposes. So that is commercial fishery. So therefore, water is used for domestic purposes like bathing, cooking, cleaning, washing, gardening, etc. Water is used for commercial purposes in hospitals and hotels and educational institutions, offices, theatres, etc. And fresh water is also used on a large scale for irrigation during agricultural practices. And not just that, water is also used for commercial freshwater fisheries through aquaculture and pisciculture. So these are the uses of water. And apart from that, industries also make use of water on a large scale. The best example is the mining industry. They make use of water on a large scale. The paper industry is to prepare the paper, pulp and all that. A large amount of water is needed. So 20 to 30% of fresh water is used for industrial operations and also by the ore. That is, ore is nothing but the mineral ores. For mineral mining and oil refineries also it is used, wherein in mineral mining and oil refineries they use it for chemical process, that is for refining the minerals and the oil. And they are also used in iron and steel industries. They are used in paper and pulp industries. Not just that, they are also used in the timber industries. So there are a lot of uses of water here. And not just that, various power plants, that is the thermal power plants, the hydroelectric power plants, they also use water for cooling or as a power source. So for cooling a particular equipment also water is needed, and also in hydroelectric plants water is the main source. Why? Because here plants means, don't think it is the green plants that I am talking about. Plants is nothing but the industry. It is the industry. So in hydroelectric power plants and all, it is used, wherein there mainly electricity is generated by using water itself. So for that, water is useful. And not just that, water is also used in cooling machineries, especially in distillation units. So distillation units means we get a lot of distilled water. Distilled water is used in many industries, educational institutions, for running a lot of machineries, batteries and all that. This distilled water is very, very important. So that distilled water, the instrument that is used to get the distilled water, which is called as the distillation unit, that needs to be kept cool throughout when the distillation of water process is taking place. So for that also lots of water is used here. So water is also used for cooling machineries, especially in the distillation units, and water is also used in timber industry. So in timber industries, usually to soften the wood, for before converting it into a furniture or something, to soften the wood, they actually use this water, wherein they'll have large tanks filled with water. In that they would have immersed the logs and kept it for few time. So for that particular purpose, in timber industries also water is used. And not just that, water also plays a very, very important role in sculpting the earth's surface. So the earth's surface should always be moist, right? Because if it is a dry surface, can we grow crops on that? Not possible. So therefore, the earth's surface should always be moist if greenery has to be maintained, and also if the crops has to be grown properly. So for molding the earth's or sculpting the earth's surface also, water is very, very important. And water is also important for maintaining the climate and also to dilute the pollutants or to reduce the pollutants. Also water is very, very important. So these are the different uses of water. So this question can be asked for either 4 marks or 10 marks. So if it is for 4 marks, just write it as 5 points. 5 points if you write it is enough. For 10 marks means at least 10 points you need to write about the uses of water. So these are the uses of water. Next, let's study about the over-exploitation of surface and groundwater. So it is the over-exploitation. What do you mean by over-exploitation? The overuse. Unnecessary use more than that is needed. That is actually causing a depletion or a reduction in the fresh water both at the ground as well as the surface level. So water demand progressively increases due to its use for agriculture, industries and domestic requirements. So population growth is the main culprit behind this, right? Why? Because as and when the population increases, the demand for water also increases, the demand for food increases. When the demand for food increases, obviously the agricultural lands will increase, the production of crops will increase, therefore the usage of water will also increase. So therefore population is one of the main culprit for the over exploitation of surface as well as groundwater. And when the surface water completely gets diminished or it is reducing, people will start depending on the groundwater in the form of wells and in the form of bore wells. So that is how they make use of the groundwater as well. So wherever surface water storage or canal irrigation is absent or limited, there is a greater activity of groundwater extraction. As I told you, in some places they will not have surface water, that is rivers, ponds, lakes, etc. will not be there. So at that time, where will they use water for irrigation, for domestic purposes, for industrial purposes and all that? They will start digging wells, they will start boring bore wells, right? Or they will start digging bore wells. So that is when the surface water is not available, they will start to make you or they will start to utilize the groundwater as well. So surface water can seep underground and it becomes groundwater. Groundwater can resurface on land to replenish water surface. So what is the surface water and groundwater? So surface water is nothing but the water that is present on the surface of the land, that is lakes, rivers, etc. But these surface water, they can enter in through the soil, enter into the ground, and they can get converted into groundwater. Or in other terms, or vice versa, the groundwater can come out, can seep through the ground, or it can come out of the ground and it can form the surface water. Best example is spring. So spring water, usually it will be present below the ground, but at certain time due to environmental factors, they will start coming from the below ground level and they will form a water body there, so becoming a surface water. So that is how surface water. So therefore, the level of groundwater also depends on the surface water. The amount of surface water can also depend on the groundwater. Both are interconnected to one another. So any one gets reduced or deplenished, then it will cause a problem for the overall freshwater availability. So since surface water is more accessible than the groundwater, human beings mostly rely or depend on surface water itself, because on the surface itself in the form of lakes, rivers and all, it is present. Therefore, it is easy to make use of the surface water than the groundwater, because for groundwater we'll have to dig a well, we'll have to dig a bore well and all that, which is quite expensive and time consuming, laborious and all that, right? So that is why surface water, since it is easily accessible, surface water is the one that is most exploited by humans when compared to the groundwater. And since lakes, ponds, rivers, seas, etc., they are usually used as dumping grounds, especially they are used as dumping grounds for industrial and sewage waste. And not just that, even dead bodies are also dumped in the fresh water, solid waste are also dumped. Hence, all these pollutants will actually degrade, or it will bring down the quality of the water, which will not just reduce the quantity of fresh water, but also it will give rise to a lot of environmental, ecological as well as health problems also. So water, it is a place which is not used for any of agriculture purposes or all that. Land means people want land for construction, for agriculture purpose, for all that. But water, nobody is bothered about it. What they do, any waste that is there, it is easy, just dump it in the water. This in turn is polluting the water. Therefore, this pollution is causing a degradation in the quantity of fresh water, though it is a renewable resource. But because of the overexploitation we humans are doing, it is depleting the freshwater level. And this gives rise to a lot of problems, including health problems, because it will become a breeding ground for the mosquitoes, various bacteria, pathogens and all that causes a lot of human diseases. So we have some of the waterborne diseases like cholera, tuberculosis, etc., right? So all that will spread if the fresh water is not kept clean. So therefore, since fresh water is an important source of drinking water and is used for the irrigation of farmland, it is the duty of every citizen to not misuse the water, not overexploit the water, and maintain cleanliness of the water. And also, some of the reasons for overexploitation of water is industrialization, then tourism, then entertainment. So all these has led to a decrease in the surface as well as the groundwater, because for all these, can we use the marine water, that is the salty water? Not possible. We need to depend on the fresh water itself. So as and when the population increases, the number of industries that develop also increases, and the need for tourism for recreational purposes also increases. Therefore, all these make use of large amount of water, including the wastage of water, including for both supply and sanitation, which can lead to more pressure on the water resources and also therefore on the natural ecosystem. So this is how, for various reasons, because of human overexploitation, the fresh water is getting depleted even though it is a renewable resource. Next, let's talk in detail about the overexploitation of groundwater. So we knew that surface water is the one that is most overexploited because it is easily available. But I had also told you that when surface water is not available, the next option is people going for the groundwater, right? So groundwater is also being overexploited to a number of reasons. What are those? Let's look into. So increased extraction of groundwater has led to decreased groundwater level. So groundwater, it is always, say for example, there is a well and you cannot make one more well within a few meters because many number of wells that you dig out, the groundwater will get depleted very, very easily and all the wells will stop having water. Alright. So emergence of springs will completely stop. So that is why when constructing a bore well or a well also, people should be very, very careful. At least for few houses, let they build a bore well in one particular place so that people can go there and make use of the fresh water. Not providing bore wells or wells to each of the houses because it will completely diminish or it will completely deplete the groundwater level. And not just that, one more reason is scanty rainfall. Nowadays, the rainfall that is there has reduced to a drastic extent, right? Why? Again, because of the loss of forest, because of cutting down of trees or the over exploitation of the forest. So therefore, resulting in scanty or very less rainfall. So therefore, very less rainfall causes a reduction in the storage of water in the reservoirs, leading to decrease of groundwater. So scanty rainfall because whatever rainfall that is there, few amount of water will remain on the surface. The remaining water will seep into the ground and it will form the groundwater. Now water itself, rainfall itself is not there. Then how can the groundwater level be maintained, right? So that is how it will lead to a decrease in the groundwater level. Next, various construction activities. They also alter the groundwater level and they reduce the area for percolation of rainwater. So what do you mean by percolation? Say for example, percolation means there is a heavy rain. Well, every time when there is a heavy rain in a village area and all, do you find flooding? No. Why? Because the water will seep off into the ground, right? And it will get stored below the ground as groundwater. But see in cities, especially, we'll take the example of Bangalore. One small rain will flood few of the places in Bangalore. Why is it so? First thing is because proper drainage is not there. Second reason is everywhere they have built pavements, right? Where cements are there, no soil at all in the road. So therefore, when the soil is covered, how will the water seep to the ground? Therefore, the water will get accumulated on the surface, leading to flood-like conditions. So that is why such construction activities, construction of roads, pavements, and nowadays we have this floor bricks that are there, all that is used, wherein all that will cover the soil surface. So that will prevent the seepage of water to the below ground level. Therefore, the groundwater level will start to decrease. And higher groundwater withdrawal rate. So I told you, usually nowadays, more than depending on the surface water, groundwater is used for agricultural purposes on a large scale. So therefore, higher the groundwater withdrawal rate or the use of groundwater than the recharge rate. So here what happens? Rainfall is also scanty, but the use of groundwater has increased. Therefore, the time given for the groundwater to replenish or bring back to its original or come back to its original level has drastically reduced. But people are continuously making use of the groundwater and not allowing it to replenish itself back or fill back. So that is one of the reasons why groundwater is depleting. And not just that, it has increased the sediments in the aquifers, resulting in sinking or overlaying land surface, thereby reversing the flow of canals, leading to tidal flooding. So here what happens here is sometimes because of the construction of dams and all that, sediments get built up, or because of various human activities, construction purposes, sediments get built up. because of wrong agricultural practices, sediments gets built up. So all these sediment build up, what it will do is, it will destroy the surface water. So when there is no surface water, then the seepage of water, there is no question about the seepage of water to the below ground level. So no seepage of water to the below ground level, and continuous use of the groundwater by the people for various purposes will automatically reduce the groundwater level, and the groundwater level will become zero. So not just that, even the building up of the sediments and all that will also lead to tidal flooding, wherein the water runoff will take place, but the seepage of water to the below ground will not occur. So these are the various reasons or various factors or various reasons for overexploitation of groundwater as well as surface water. So this can also be a 10-mark question, wherein if you write at least 10 points, you can get marks easily. Next is overutilization of groundwater in arid, that is in dry area and in semi-dry areas. For agriculture, this also disturbs the equilibrium of reservoir in the region, causing problems like lowering of water table and decreased pressure in the aquifers, along with changes in speed and direction of water flow. So there are some areas which are very dry, because dry means surface water is not there. At that time, people will have to depend on or rely on the groundwater. So dry areas and semi-dry areas wherein people completely depend on the groundwater for agriculture, at that time what happens, the equilibrium or the balance between the groundwater level will get altered. So this alteration in the balance will cause a lot of problem, like it will bring down the level of water in the water table, it will decrease the pressure, or it will decrease the replenishing back capability of the aquifers, that is the ponds, rivers, lakes, etc. And not just that, it also will lead to the change in the direction of water flow as well. So all these will lead to the depletion of the groundwater. And overutilization or overexploitation of groundwater in coastal areas, because coastal areas also the availability of fresh water is less, because there the salt water is more. So here with the minimal amount of fresh water is there, all the people have to depend on it. So therefore overexploitation of groundwater in the coastal areas leads to rapid intrusion of salt water from the sea. So that time what happens, when the groundwater table, that is the fresh water that is there, when it depletes, the water to replenish itself back, for the water table to replenish itself back, it will start drawing the sea water from the nearby seas, etc. Therefore, making that particular groundwater unusable for drinking and agriculture. So, in coastal areas also, we are not supposed to overutilize the fresh water, because in order to replenish the fresh water, the ground will start collecting water from the nearby seas. So, that is when that groundwater can also become salty. So, that is why. And overutilization of groundwater leads to decrease in water level, thereby causing earthquakes, landslides and famine, that is drought. Drought or unavailability of water. So, because water is needed to hold the soil particles together. If that is not happening properly, because of the decrease in the water level or the groundwater level, it results in earthquakes, landslides and farming. So next, the overutilization of groundwater leads to drying up of the dug wells as well as the bore wells also, because overexploitation means continuously you are using the groundwater and you are not giving time for the water to fill back in that particular region, then it will lead to a complete reduction in the groundwater level. And due to excess use of groundwater near agricultural fields, agricultural water that contains nitrogen as a fertilizer, it will percolate rapidly and also it will pollute the groundwater, thereby rendering the water unfit for potable use by infants especially. So, for agricultural fields, so whatever water is there near the agricultural fields we make use of it to such an extent, reducing the quantity of water. So when the quantity of water in the rivers and ponds, etc., which is flowing near the agricultural field, or the groundwater that is there near the agricultural field, it will decrease, then the amount of nitrogen content in that will increase. So what happens here is, we have a farm. So in that farm, we would have put nitrogen fertilizer, right? Because nitrogen is one of the important fertilizer that is needed for the growth of the plants. So when we put nitrogen fertilizer, it's just like you take a tumbler of water, put salt to that and dissolve it in 1 tumbler. Now make that water into half and again dissolve a teaspoon of salt, which will be more salty, that wherein you dissolved 1 teaspoon full of water with full tumbler of water, or 1 with half tumbler of water. The half tumbler of water will be more concentrated, right? That is what happens here also. In the agriculture, what happens? Whatever fertilizer you use, for example nitrogen, if you add nitrogen, some of the nitrogen will seep to the soil and it will mix with the groundwater. Now when the groundwater is more, it is not a problem. But when the groundwater is very less and the nitrogen content gets added to it continuously, what happens? It will pollute the groundwater, and therefore that groundwater which can be used for drinking purposes cannot be used for drinking purposes, because it is not good. Nitrogen is not good for infants, babies or small children especially. So that is how the overexploitation of groundwater for agricultural purposes can lead to the depletion of the groundwater level. So these are the various factors which are responsible for the depletion of the groundwater as well as the surface water. So next, moving further, let us study about flood. So what is flood? So flood is an overflow of water whenever the magnitude of flow of water exceeds the carrying capacity of the channel within its bank. So there is a river will have its normal flow. So when that normal flow, because of heavy rains and all that, if it exceeds and it will submerge the neighboring lands or river bank and all that that is there, then it is nothing but called as a flood. So that is the definition of flood. So talking about flood, let's learn what are the causes of flood. So few of the causes here are heavy rainfall can cause flood. The melting of the snow caps or the ice cap or the glacier can cause flood, and whenever there is heavy rainfall, the sudden release of water from dams causes floods in the low-lying areas. That is especially, and also floods can occur in the coastal areas because of heavy rains and therefore because of the heavy tides and all that. So all these are the different causes. So here talking about rainfall. So prolonged, that is continuous heavy rainfall will cause the overflowing, or it will change the capacity of flow of the lakes and rivers, resulting in floods. And also reduction in carrying capacity of river channels due to accumulation of sediments. So here what happens? There is a particular river. That river will have a depth. So deeper the river, more amount of water it can hold, right? But what happens here is, because of over agriculture, because of the use of over fertilizers, because of heavy rain and all that, what happens? All the soil will erode and get collected in that particular river, and it will lead to build-up of the sediment. Now, the depth of the river, when the sediment is building up, the depth of the river will decrease and the water holding capacity of the river will automatically decrease. Therefore, the reduction in the carrying capacity of water by the rivers will lead to overflow of the water, and therefore it causes flood. And deforestation, overgrazing, mining, all these also increases the runoff water from rains, causing floods. So trees, they help in the percolation of water, that is, they help in the seepage of water to the below ground level. So that is why trees, grasses and all that are very, very important. But the cutting of trees for various purposes, overgrazing of the land for livestock purposes, and the increase in mining, all that will lead to a reduction in the plant population. Therefore, it will cause flooding. So therefore, deforestation, overgrazing, mining also increases the flooding rate. Then removal of dense uniform forest cover over the hilly zones can also lead to the occurrence of floods. Why? Because here in the hilly zones, what happens when deforestation is done in the hilly zones or cutting of trees is done in the hilly zones, what happens when the heavy downpour is there, the landslide will occur. So when the landslide occurs, it will move to the below ground, that is, it will move to the lower levels wherever a water is flowing. That can even change the direction of water, leading to flooding. And a lack of vegetation can also cause flooding, because I told you overgrazing, all those can also cause flooding, because vegetation, it helps in preventing water runoff and therefore prevents flooding, because more number of vegetation, more number of water the soil can absorb. So therefore surface runoff will be reduced. But no vegetation means the surface runoff will get completely increased and therefore the seepage of water will be completely reduced. So when there is a lack of vegetation, there is little to stop water from running off and overflowing in the rivers, banks, streams, etc. So what happens? So the plants usually, they act as a barrier, slowing down the flow of water. Therefore, plants are one of the important things or important features that are needed in order to prevent flooding. So these are the different causes for flooding. Next, let's study about the effects of flooding. So flood, they carry various contaminants. So flood carry contamination which can lead to a lot of diseases in the human population. Floods can also harm the wildlife because they would have drowned the forest and all that, therefore putting the wildlife in a threat. Next, floods can cause sedimentation and erosion. So sedimentation means more number of heavier the flood, the more is the buildup of the sediments in the rivers, lakes, etc. And also heavy water flow can cause soil erosion. All these also causes flooding. Next is floods, they spread diseases. And next, floods, they wash away nutrients. Why? Because whenever the water is overflowing, whatever nutrient is there in the soil, that is the top layer of the soil, that will be washed away. So therefore, floods will wash away the nutrients, making it lesser available to the plant. So these are the different effects of floods. Next, talking about the management of floods. So what can be done to manage floods? So here, flood risk assessment and mapping has to be done regularly. That is, prior itself, the forecast department or the weather department, they have to map which are the regions more vulnerable to flooding. When can the flooding occur? All that they have to map and they have to keep it ready so that in beforehand itself they can follow some safety measures in order to prevent the flooding. Next, forecasting and flood warning should be given. So people should be notified prior itself that in this particular area flooding is going to occur. You need to vacate, you need to take active measures for that. So that has to be done. Next, flood management structures has to be built. So for this, the best example that I can take of is Japan. So Japan, any number of tsunamis or any number of flood situation they are put into, within a year they just spring back, right? The city will look as if nothing has happened. That is their capability of how hardworking they are. Apart from that, what they do in Japan is they build large walls as a barrier between the places where people are living, between the land and the water, so that whenever there is a flood, the flood water will not enter the land area. So all these measures, that is flood management structures and all that will be constructed, can be constructed so that the floods can be managed. So these are the three important steps how the floods can be managed. Because we cannot prevent them, because some of the natural calamities cannot be prevented, but once it occurs, there are chances that how we can, prior itself, we can take certain measures in order to manage the situation. Next, talking about droughts. So what is a drought? A drought is a period of time when an area or region experiences below normal precipitation. So what do you mean by precipitation? It is nothing but rainfall. So any region that receives very less rainfall or scanty rainfall, there a dry condition will arise. That is nothing but drought. So next, talking about the causes of drought. So one of the main cause of drought is less rainfall. So annual rainfall, if it is very, very low, that is very, very low means below normal and less than the evaporation, drought will occur. So that is what happens here, right? Rainfall will occur, evaporation will occur, again that will come back as rain. It's the cycle continues, right? But here what happens when the annual rainfall is itself not there, how will the evaporation of water take place? So therefore, how will the again next set of rain come? That is not possible. So therefore, less rainfall is one of the reasons for drought. Next is population growth. So higher population can lead to drought. Why? Because population growth leads to poor or improper land use, and also it will worsen the situation. Why? Because I told you, as the population increases, the urbanization increases, wherein less amount of soil will be there, more amount of cement only you will find everywhere. So that also can cause droughts to a larger extent. Next is because of improper agricultural practices. So whenever an agriculture is done, we should not do agriculture throughout the year. A time gap should be given wherein at one particular season agriculture should be done, the next season agriculture should not be done, so that we can depend on the natural sources of water that is there. But what people do, because of overpopulation and increasing food demand, throughout the year they'll try to grow the crop, which will result in the drought condition. So therefore, intensive cropping pattern and over exploitation of scarce water resources or over-exploitation of the already very less available water resources by digging wells or bore wells for high productivity has turned the drought-prone areas into deserts. So here what happens, as and when the agriculture increases, the making use of the groundwater increases. As the groundwater usage increases, the depletion of the groundwater table will increase, and therefore that particular area which was once a drought or a dry area will get converted into a desert area. So therefore, improper agricultural practices can also lead to drought conditions. Next is deforestation, that is cutting of trees. So cutting of trees can also lead to desertification and drought, and deforestation can also lead to the exposure of the topsoil to erosion. And when the erosion occurs, what happens? The topsoil gets washed away, therefore the nutrients gets washed away, and again there that land will become not suitable for the plants to grow, therefore again worsening the drought situation. So that is how deforestation can also cause droughts. Next, let's look into what are the effects of drought. So drought can cause hunger, because if the land is dry, crops cannot be grown. Obviously, it will lead hunger, will lead to the that is unavailability of food, will lead to malnutrition, and also it will lead to the scarcity of drinking water. And not just that, drought also will degrade the quality of the drinking water. It will make the water not that suitable for drinking, and drought causes crop failure, leading to shortage of food, and therefore it will affect both the human as well as the animal population, that is the human and the livestock population. And not just that, drought over a period of time can also lead to desertification, and once desertification occurs, it is not possible to reverse the situation back. And use of lots of raw materials for agro-based industries, they are also causing a lot of drought, because we are utilizing a lot of plant raw materials for agro-based industries. Therefore, the plant population is coming down, leading to drought condition, and therefore retarding industrial and commercial growth as well. And drought, not just that, it increases the degradation of the natural available resources such as the plants, animals, and all that. And not just that, drought leads to large scale migration of the people from urban areas to, that is from rural areas to urban areas, and to some places leading to the development of slums. And more the number of slums, that is crowded the population, a lot of diseases and not problems will come up, right? So these are the different effects of drought. So droughts can also lead to migration of people. People will leave that particular place and start settling or crowding themselves in the place where there is no drought or where availability of water is there, leading to a lot of changes in the lifestyle of the people. So these are the effects of droughts. So now let's see how we can manage the drought. So we can manage the drought by indigenous knowledge in the control of droughts. So we have to provide education in the primary levels itself, so that children will understand and learn the importance of water and how we can save water, therefore preventing drought condition. Next is by rainwater harvesting. So rainwater harvesting, so there are rains that are falling on the house roofs and all that, right? That goes a waste. Instead of that, these houses can collect the rainwater, and that rainwater itself, they can use it for various cooking purposes, domestic purposes and all that. So by rainwater harvesting also droughts can be prevented. By construction of reservoirs such as dams, storage water bodies, etc., droughts can be prevented. Next, by following modern irrigation technique, that is drip irrigation. So we have sprinkler type of irrigation where most of the time water gets wasted, right? But in drip irrigation, what happens? The water pipes will be laid in the field near the root of the plant, and there itself one drop of water will be left. So that drop of water will just fall right where the plant is there. So therefore, wastage of water is very minimal there. So that is how modern irrigation techniques such as drip irrigation can also prevent drought. Next is afforestation. Wherever there are no trees, try planting trees. Afforestation can also prevent drought. Next is mixed cropping and dry farming. These are also very important. So mixed cropping means grow crops which need water as well as which make use of very less water, so that minimal amount of water can be used for the field. Next, dry farming. These are the suitable methods that minimize the risk of crop failure in dry and drought prone areas. So these are the ways how the drought can be managed. Next, let's study about the conflicts over water. So a lot of conflict has been going over water, both in the international level and the national level, right? So here I have listed few conflicts here. So what are the different conflicts? So international conflicts means it is conflict between the nations. National conflict means conflict between within the nation itself, that is between neighboring villages or between the states and all that. So international conflicts means conflict over water from the Indus. So Indus river between India and Pakistan. So this Indus Valley, this river that flows between India and Pakistan, there is always a conflict between the two nations for this particular water source. Next, conflict over water from the Colorado River between Mexico and USA. So between Mexico and USA, there is a river called as Colorado River that flows. So every now and then there is a conflict between Mexico and USA for this particular water from this particular river. So conflict over the Shatt al-Arab between Iran and Iraq. There is a river that is called as Shatt al-Arab. So this Shatt al-Arab, it flows between Iran and Iraq, and always there is a conflict over water between these two countries for this particular river. Next, conflict over water from the Brahmaputra between India and Bangladesh. So Brahmaputra river flows between India and Bangladesh. There also there is a conflict. So why this conflict usually arises? Because dams would have been constructed. The continuous flow of water from the river to the neighboring nation will be stopped. So therefore, the people in that particular country will start protesting for it. So these are the different international conflicts that are there. Next, talking about the national conflicts. So one of the main national conflicts that we keep hearing every year is the Kaveri Conflict, right? Conflict for the water for river Kaveri, that is Kaveri water between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So Tamil Nadu, they actually grow crops throughout the year. It is not like how we grow crops in Karnataka. They don't grow crops at a particular season. They grow crops throughout the year. And I told you, growing crops throughout the year will obviously cause scarcity of water. So that is why the Tamil Nadu people will always start fighting over the Kaveri water, because the Kaveri water flow is restricted due to the dam that is constructed in the river Kaveri. Of course, some TMCs of water are left to Tamil Nadu every year, but still because of their improper agricultural practices, that water is not enough for them. So therefore, giving rise to a conflict. Next is the Krishna water between Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. So both the states need to share this particular water, and there is an issue between the sharing of Krishna water between Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. And next is the sharing of Siruveni water between Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So that is how between two states in a country itself, for water, a lot of conflicts are occurring. So these are the different conflicts of water, that is both international conflicts and the national conflicts. So with this particular session comes to an end. In the next coming session, let us learn about the heating of earth and the circulation of air, wherein we'll study about the atmospheric circulation, which is one of the major reasons for how the temperature of the earth has to be. And we shall learn about air mass formation and also about precipitation, that is rainfall. So all this we'll study in the coming session. So we shall meet again in the coming session. Thank you.